Roll for Crit is made possible thanks to the support of viewers like you and our patrons on our Patreon page.
You can become a patron for just $1 a month at patreon.com/rollforcrit.
Welcome to Roll for Crit's continuing coverage of Gen Con Online. And from North Star Games across the digital sea, we have Dominic, who is here to tell us about Oceans, as well as maybe some game design process that happen at North Star Games. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So Oceans came out about a year ago? Was the official release?
So the Kickstarter was last year, but the release was this year, spring. I think it was actually supposed to be May 25th, and Alliance had shut down half their distribution centers, and we just weren't able to really properly release it. So we haven't really properly released it. We've just gotten it now out to all of our Kickstarter backers. And we have another print run that arrives in our warehouse fairly soon, in a couple weeks. And then we're going to try to do a proper launch at some point. Everything else was pre-release copies that went over and we shipped out to reviewers.
Okay. Yeah, we're the privileged few, so I don't. The real world doesn't hit me the same way. I'm like, it's out. Everyone can play it.
But yeah, I really can't wait for it to get into regular release because we had a blast playing it. And in our when we took a look at it, we thought how it was almost like a re-implementation in a way. Evolution has so many great fun things with you can fly now or deal with temperatures, but Oceans we felt had so many fun different twists, and it is a different game. It's not just expansion. So I am curious about this. How do you decide? Should this just be an expansion we throw onto a game? How do we do new re-implementation of it instead? Because I don't think Evolution, I guess it'd still be part of the Evolution line, would be the only game that this would be you to think about this for.
Yeah, so it was originally conceived as an expansion to Evolution, and I was going to have two watering holes, a standalone expansion. You could either just do kind of the ocean, or you could put it with Evolution, and there'd be two watering holes, basically the ocean and the watering hole. And there would be a trait that I put a whole bunch of traits in called amphibious. And you could play it on a land creature to have access to the food in the ocean, or a sea creature to have access to the food on land. And it turned out that the theme just fell apart. Climbing doesn't make sense on an aquatic species. There's just so many things where it just really didn't work thematically. And part of the reason is there's very little interplay between oceanic ecosystems and land-based ecosystems. So this one, it was theme-driven. This one really had to be its own deal because it didn't make sense for it to interact with with Evolution.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, we've loved Evolution, of course, and its expansions that kind of iterated on that original idea. Was there anything specific when you set out to make Oceans that, having the opportunity at that point to make an entirely new standalone product that you thought you wanted to improve upon or change, or just something you wanted to do to make it feel like a totally different experience from the original game?
So there were a bunch of hands in the pot. I kind of took over the whole thing, I don't know, a couple of years ago, brought it in-house and just decided we needed one cook and one person to kind of give it vision. So I can't really speak to what some of the other things were that went into early, prototypes. But I had a couple goals. One was to make it more forgiving than Evolution. So one of the issues that a lot of people have with Evolution is when you get targeted, you really get smashed, you get pummeled. Or you can, and it's actually compounded, with new players who don't understand how to protect themselves. So that was one of the main things, is how do I allow for interaction without it being so punishing when you get targeted. And I spent a lot of time thinking about that. I worked on that issue when I first made Evolution the beginning for Target, and then just kept working on that. The next thing I really wanted was, I was a pro Magic player for 5 years or so. Are you a Magic player?
I am, yeah.
Nice. I really wanted to bring that collectible card game feeling where a world seems expansive and there are synergies and you get really excited to explore kind of the synergies of cards. And so the Deep is really trying to bring that TCG experience to board gamers where it feels limitless. So you're discovering new content. You're like, oh, wow, what if this goes with this? And that sense of discovery that you have in a collectible card game, I was trying to bring to the board game space with the Deep.
Yeah, that makes sense. And as a Magic player's point of view, it really feels like the basic upgrades you can get feels a bit more like standard, where you usually want 4 copies of the same thing. So you usually see a lot of the same things. When the Deep goes into the EDH or Commander style, where like you don't know, there's a single copy of everything, and next thing you know, Predatory comes out and like, okay, we're making this a very aggressive game now.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, Will can appreciate
Invasive Predator. Sorry.
Oh, that one's a promo card because it is very aggressive.
That's the one we came across very early on. It really changed the spirit of the game in an interesting way.
Yeah, but the reason it's a promo is because there's a small group of people that will love it, and that'll be one of their favorite cards. But for the broader audience, I didn't want to include it directly in the game.
Makes sense. Yeah. Will can appreciate the, like you said, the Magic influence, the trading card game aspect there. I, on the other hand, am grateful for you making it less punishing as someone who always has my creatures being eaten and feeling sad about it. So the losers of the world like me appreciate that.
Well, it's not even because I agree. It was one of those things we noticed in Evolution where it was hard not to choose the person who just got eaten because I guess in natural nature, they're very easy targets. So you keep feeding on them. In Oceans, you didn't get that same sort of aspect. Because there's bottom feeders now, and there's also I can't remember the name of the card, but like the leeches, all the things that there's so much neighboring with each other that changes up how you have to think. And I never felt like, oh, I'm just going to eat you. There's like, oh, I have tentacles, so if I do this, I'll eat this, and that way I don't overpopulate and then kill off half my things, and then there's much more strategizing that seems to spread the damage around more in the end.
Yeah, and you don't go extinct as soon as you run out of population. That's one of the key places, which kind of makes the theme a little bit harder to latch onto for people, but it was critical in it not feeling that bad when you got attacked. You're like, okay, well, I just all I have to do is put myself in a position where I can get enough food to age next round, and we're fine.
Right. Now there's an Evolution, a video game version of Evolution that has been pretty successful, I think. Any thoughts of maybe doing something like that for Oceans? Is that in the works?
Yes.
Okay.
That is in the works.
Next question.
That is in the works, and I hate to say anything about it because getting rid of the bugs just takes forever. There's especially a game with 100 unique cards, so it is still in its early stages.
Oh, I thought you were just being mean to bugs like beetles and stuff.
No, we're bug friendly over here. Yeah, well, that's exciting. That's something to look forward to. I mean, you have a lot of great games, North Star games beyond Oceans. Some that you've had more direct hand in, I think, than others. But do you have, when designing, is there a general philosophy that you have about game design, something that you are attempting to do with all of your games?
Definitely.
We'd love to hear it.
So it depends on the genre. It depends on the audience. Games can just do so many things. You can make competitive games where people are trying to outthink the other person. You can make storytelling games. You can make party games where you're just trying to interact and break down social barriers. So it starts with who's the audience and what do you want the game to accomplish. If it's going to be a party game that you introduce to casual gamers, the rule set has to be really simple. The activity just has to be fun and entertaining. I love when there's social interaction, which is why a game like Oceans could easily be a solitary engine builder, but one, that's not true to the theme of evolution. Ecosystems are all intertwined. And two, one of the fun elements of gaming for me is that different people play differently. And so like my son will always be aggressive. And I know that he's going to be aggressive, and some people never want to be aggressive. And so we tried to allow for both of that style in the game. But I think one of the interesting things about games is playing it with people and having the people's that you're playing with have their personality kind of come out in the game, because that keeps the game fresh. When you play it with new people, it interacts differently, as opposed to a game that's just pure resource management and you could play against an AI and it would be the same as another player.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's true, because there are plenty of games where, it's the design is, for instance, you said like to be aggressive, and to play it well, that's just what you have to do. But you definitely see a lot more replayability, a lot more versatility when it's a game where there are multiple viable paths. So depending on how you play, I think that's to me that's usually more interesting as a player, especially if it's like you happen to find a game that doesn't exactly jive with your personal style or something like that. But so that's something that's I guess like a broad reaching game design philosophy that you have. But of course you have more specific titles. We're talking about Oceans. I'd love to talk about Wits and Wagers a little bit too, because I think you still have some new versions of that are coming out at some point in the future.
I have new versions that are very well polished and have tested really well. Figuring out when to put it in the schedule, and that's a tougher issue.
Right. But I mean, that game has become huge. I feel like it's. I don't know if you caught Portal Games had their Portal Con a couple weeks ago, and they had a Portal edition of Wits and Wagers online. And when we were at Gen Con, we would always, they always, of course, have the live, in person, when we were allowed to be in person, play with groups of Wits and Wagers. And I feel like it's reached a point where it's almost just like bar trivia or something. It goes beyond board games. It feels like a very universal concept. Is that something that you you deserve that praise? I mean, was that something you intended designing that game, or it's like a happy thing that it's sort of become that now?
Well, it's a happy thing that it's become that in the hobby world. We promoted the game that way. So at the first couple Gen Cons we went to, so like in 2004, before it had been released, we were showing it to like 2 to 4 people at a time. And so on the business side, we were thinking, this is slow going to like, people were enjoying it, but it was really slow, laborious to like get the word out. So we created a format where you play in teams. And so then we could teach it to 50 new people at a time. And so after the hall was closed, we do 2 game shows every night. So we did, well, I think not Sunday night. So we did, I think 6 game shows. And then we would bring it to 50 new people at each of these shows. I mean, up to 60 or 70 people would play, but we'd usually raise hands like, how many people are new? Part of that was actually all of that was just because we wanted to know how many new people we were reaching, and like, is this worth our time? And it was always like nearly 50 new people that we were teaching the game to, and the experience was just fun. So they left having fun, and we just showed 50 people in an hour the game.
On Wits and Wagers, this is something I'm curious about, because we always talk about this when dealing with any kind of game with trivia. How do you actually decide what trivia you're going to include in there to make sure it's not everyone knows what the answer is, but also not so random and obscure that people are like, I don't know, 6, and just sort of like they don't even
and they don't
like
care. Yeah. Well, you just nailed it. I mean, that is one of the key things that we do. It's got to be something that people are familiar with. For instance, Mount Everest, everyone's heard of. And so you can ask a question about that. You want to ask a question about something that people have a touchstone for, and not something that they've learned in class, like in what year was the U.S. Revolutionary War. Everyone will write the same answer, and it's really not a fun question. But we did test that question once, and someone did not write the right answer.
I'm not going to answer it myself and get it wrong. But I will mention also a small thing, because the last trivia game, this is something that bugged me. Thank you for putting a source for something, because sometimes we're like, I can't remember. There's a question we were just like, where did they get that? I don't believe that.
Right. Or a year also helps too, especially as, you play older editions maybe years later and you're like, well, I don't know, when did this happen? Because the world changes, as we've discovered a lot lately, which can be an interesting challenge. And it's a shame that we're not able to get together in person this year and do things like that, because Wits and Wagers does make such a great communal experience. Do you guys have anything planned, events, anything like that for Gen Con online this year? Are you doing any online stuff?
We are not even attending Gen Con this year. This is the only way I'm attending. Is this going to go on Gen Con?
You heard it
here.
Yep,
this is, you're part of the we made it official. Yeah, you're here. That's right. Yeah, well, hopefully people can, have been coming together in their own homes. Actually, Wits and Wagers is, I think, a good one that has been easier to play remotely by nature of its design. Has that been something you guys have been doing, whether it's for work or just in your own personal time for fun, or any different games that have been working for you that way?
I have not at all. Someone did just recently put together a really good online version that you can Zoom that that does all the odds and everything for you. Like, you literally can place your chips and stuff. And you say how much you want to bet. So I've like promoted that, but no. So our company's going through a lot of changes right now. We actually had to let go of about half of our employees last year. So we lost about 11 people. And so there's just a lot of structural issues to figure out who does what do we just not do, what's important. So I've been spending a lot of the time recently, which is why we decided not to do some of the online conventions this year, is to just focus on kind of rebuilding our company and making sure it makes sense.
Yeah, it's not, by the sound of this is before everyone got locked away. So how's it been now that you can't actually be in person? Has that really affected it at all, or has that just been another wrench in the plans of trying to sort everything out?
Yeah, it was another wrench in the plans for a while. I'd say now, sales seem to be fine. So everything seems to be fine, but we've been really focused, kind of backwards focused, or so normally my job is product development and marketing, which are all like forward looking. And we've been, I'd say, scared of our company just crumbling and going bankrupt. So it's like, okay, I don't want to spend any time looking into the future if there's not going to be a future. So I'm spending a lot of time just looking at systemically what are the things we're doing wrong, and what should the processes be, and how do we like make a core that's sustainable.
Yeah, you wear a lot of different hats, I feel, of game designer and also managing company and business day-to-day stuff. And I think you said to me that game design is really kind of your passion.
That's what I want to do. I'm trying to break away from the company.
Yeah, it's like, unfortunately, you have all that other stuff that has to get in the way of everything. But I mean, at this point, I feel like North Star Games, to us at least, it's like an institution. I hope that everything gets worked out sooner rather than later. But yeah, how do you manage that balance of wanting to just design games versus having to market them and then sell them?
So about 5 years ago, I tried to pull away from actively managing the company so that I could just spend more time on game design. That's when I did Evolution and the Evolution series and Oceans. Started doing hobby games. It also came at a time when we kind of grew and we're sprawled into so many different areas. So we're in the mass market, we're in toy and specialty, we're digital, and digital's been that's what's kind of pushing us to the brink of bankruptcy. And we're in hobby. So we're in like 4 different areas. Some of them have completely different customers. A lot of them have completely different influencers and reviewers and salespeople. So we were really just not focused. And so my dream of like pulling away and just working on games and being in my little fun ivory tower just didn't play out. And but now I think the company is looking just a lot smarter. And so I still have that dream.
So you mentioned digital was a very big hurdle. What would you, knowing what you did now, change about digital? Do you think there is a space for digital games in the board game hobby world, or
Yeah,
do you
I
think
think
that's like
so. So I would say our biggest mistake. Well, we have a bunch of mistakes. One, Evolution. I mean, the Evolution brand has sold about 300,000 copies now of the different games, so it's actually pretty large. But it wasn't really adopted by the hobby world. So the hobby world has been, I mean, like ranked on BGG, which is really what kind of defines a lot of our industry in the hobby side. It's ranked 300 and something, so it was never really adopted. And so we don't really have anyone to launch it to because we can't let all the old players know, so we can only let the new players know. And hobby really doesn't care very much about a game that's ranked 350 that came out 5 years ago. So really the marketing plan was not existent. The plan when I first went into digital was to release it at the same time as the game in 2014. And just, I could go into like all the stories, but I just kept getting pushed back and pushed back. So that was the main thing. Then I also, instead of hiring at top dollar, just like real professionals, I brought in a friend that I went to business school with who I trust, but he really didn't have experience in game design. So he's running the whole digital side. And I'd say now, 5 years later, he has the experience he would need to start from scratch. But there's just a lot to learn. And I think my theory is completely not borne out of like find talented people and they'll grow into the position. I don't believe that anymore. Like, yes, you want to find talented people, but you want them to have the job skills that you need. So if I were to do it all over again, if I were to do it, I wouldn't choose a game was released 5 years ago. Like, so like we're working on Oceans now, and we started, a year and a half ago. And so we're hoping to release it pretty close to when people are still excited about the game. And I think that's really, really important. And then also Scott has a lot more experience now. A lot of what's real difficult to do is bring in someone into what I call one of the soft sciences or soft businesses. So like game design is a lot of judgment calls. It's really difficult to say, here's the formula. Look, this is better. And marketing is the same way. There's a lot of judgment calls, and there's no, except backwards looking, you can say, oh, that didn't work. And it's really hard even to let really smart people know like why. Because so a lot of smart people will be like, they know what they like in marketing and they just think this will work. And you can tell them, I don't think it's going to work. And you can try to give you reasons, but there isn't a clear argument. And so it's really hard to steer people in those areas as opposed to like logistics. We go through it all and it's pretty clear this is a better process. This is cheaper. A whole part of the company that's quantifiable is really easy to manage because you can just demonstrate how to move forward. But on some of the things like product development and marketing, it's much more difficult to communicate vision and to get people on board if you aren't starting with people that have a lot of experience in that area.
Yeah, I guess it's hard because, as an industry, the board game industry is just still relatively very young, at least certainly in the modern iteration of it. Of course, if board games have existed for thousands of years or whatever it is,
right?
But yeah, as of right now, like everyone's still, there's so much still to learn, and as we get into those things like digital, it's as consumers and designers and producers of games, like there's it seems like there's new stuff all the time that you have to adapt to. Very apt with Evolution to be as one of your flagship titles.
Yeah, there will come a time when if you tell someone who's not in the board game hobby, be like, "Oh, I played board games," that hopefully they won't ask you, "Oh, you mean Monopoly?"
Yeah.
Hopefully they'll say, "Oh, you mean Wits and Wagers?"
Hey, that's a good step up. We've been talking about looking backward all this time, but now when I question about looking forward, what do you think is going to be the next roll and write, the next mechanic that the entire board game hobby that everyone needs to make their own version of?
So I have never focused on the next trend. So I'm really bad at it. I've just never focused on that. What I've really focused on is what are activities that resonate with the most number of people, and how can I make the simplest rule set to get people to do the fun thing. I am increasingly trying to figure out how much should we chase trends, and clearly we should chase trends more. I'm just not good at it because once I've seen a couple roll and writes, I'm like, it's done. And then it's not done. And I'm like, so I wanted to do werewolf way back before Ted did werewolf. And I worked on it a little then. And then, then when he did it, I think it was then Asmodee came out with one. I don't know. It felt like it was done. And it's not. That whole genre of, which I guess people call it, I used to call it psychological thriller, but people call it what is it? Hidden role. Social deduction.
Hidden role.
Yeah. And so a lot of times, because I'm a hobby enthusiast, I feel like it's I feel weird jumping on bandwagons. I guess there's something inherent in my character. It's a flaw. It's a character flaw.
So what you're saying is we're not going to see an Evolution roll and write where you have to draw out your weird creature.
We might.
I mean, that sounds kind of fun.
I'll tell you.
That's what I'd like to do.
You would? What, are you going to pitch it?
I mean, sure, go ahead. I mean, I haven't done more than that. I just want to draw weird animals. That's all.
That's all we got.
That's a good idea.
The rest is on you.
Yeah. A mixture of Evolution, and I designed a game called Draw Anything, which was going to be a product extension to Say Anything. And we'll just mash them together.
There you go.
Draw Sounds any Evolution. Let's just see what weird creatures come up. I'm all in.
And then everyone writes what the trait is.
Yeah, you have to guess what actually the creature is. I think it's a carnivore.
Well, let's stick on to the future. Is there anything that we mentioned the Oceans maybe digital version in the works?
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you can tease that people can look forward to from North Star Games?
Well, I can tease, but until our company's in order, I can't focus on it. I've worked on an expansion that right now for Oceans that I'm calling Mythic Empires.
Ooh.
And it is you draft cards at the beginning, empire cards. And then if you play one of these cards, it affects every one of your species. And they're so you draft them. And you draft 3 of them at the beginning of the game. There would just be 20 of these things, but they're super impactful. So, for instance, if you have a parasitic colony, and it's bringing in fantasy, so merfolk and and lots of different just lore. And so I have a parasitic colony. I'm trying to remember, but I think every one of your species before you play leeches 1 from any species in play. And so these things are huge, game breaking when they come into play, and just kind of define the whole game.
I mean, that sounds really cool, and especially with some of those weird ones, if you can bypass the usual neighboring rule, can be really annoying because usually you might want to defend yourself from leeching by putting 2 guys along their side.
Yeah,
this would be all of a sudden your turtle isn't safe anymore. No. I'm going for it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So do you feel like the Evolution line proper is kind of complete at this point with its set of expansions? No. You've got more in the works for that too, maybe?
So I've been working on a total revamp, just like Evolution 2. And one of the main reasons is because the structure of that game wasn't well thought out in terms of how to put all the expansions together. So right now, Flight is incompatible with Climate. And there are just some issues that have to be worked out. So I've been working out on those issues and then kind of improving the gameplay. And that's a project that I'm very excited to embark on at some point, which is making it less punishing for new players. So bringing about kind of all the things that I've learned that make it more forgiving and more enjoyable for a greater number of people. And creating the structure so that all the expansions will interact seamlessly, and then putting out some just other expansions. Like this Evolution to me is really theme driven. And so I've been working on a disease expansion where there are diseases and resistance. And if a carnivore attacks a species that has a disease, it then gets that disease and then it starts spreading next to it. And if scavengers eat from it, they get that disease. And so just kind of an expansion which just brings in a whole nother kind of element that you find in nature and in the real world. And then integrating it so you can put it with Climate, you can put it with Flight, you can mix and match and however you want to do these things.
That hits a little close to home right now. But if I can add one small tip to also think about with this Evolution 2, my Evolution box is I barely been able to fit everything in there, but it's not like perfectly sorted as I want. Like I have to mix some of the Flight cards I think are next to the Climate and stuff. So maybe how everything fits back in the box too would be pretty nice.
Yeah, if we kickstart this thing, there'll be a big box edition.
Yes.
So here's one of the elements that I've been working on. Right now, when you do Flight or Climate, you mix the cards together. And then if you want to take it apart, you have to sort all the cards out. So no more. There will be separate decks, and you can just bring in the deck and you can choose from which deck you want to go. And so setup and breakdown is much easier. And it allows you to play modularly and change it for the next game.
Well, that choice is also really nice too. I can think of plenty of games when there's different decks, and that way you can be like, I really want to go with this strategy right now, so I'm gonna draw it there instead of just being like, nope. I mean, I guess actually just like how you have the deep and basic. Sometimes I just want some of the basic abilities. Sometimes I want to actually do something that's very powerful because I have the cards to discards.
Yeah. Yeah, like those crazy moves. Well, I mean, that's all of that is some stuff to look forward to. It's really fascinating to hear more about your design process and get some insight into how the company is running and all that, because it's not something that we get to hear all the time. And I think that, a lot of gamers just see the new thing on Kickstarter, they see the new thing on the shelf, and they don't have a concept of what goes on behind the scenes. So I appreciate you taking the time to hang out with us and talk a little bit about that. Is there anything else that you want to add before we let you go about? I mean, I'm sure there's plenty we could talk about, but
let me just lay out some of the things that I'm working on since forward looking. So Mythic Empires, Evolution 2, Paint the Roses. Have you seen or heard of Paint the Roses?
Yes, we are familiar with it.
Okay, a cooperative deduction game in the Alice in Wonderland world where you're all gardeners and you're trying to figure out how the queen wants the garden to be. And as soon as you kind of start figuring out what she wants, she changes her mind. And so you're trying to stay one step ahead of her, and really she wants to catch up to you and chop off your head.
Yeah, it's a great theme.
It's a great theme, and Ben, who's the graphic designer for Oceans and one of the designers for Oceans, is the designer of this game. It's really tight, really clean. And I have two projects that I've been working on for years and years and years. One is Super Wits and Wagers. Have you heard of this?
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You have?
I think we actually saw maybe a prototype version of it one year at Gen Con. Is that possible?
Probably the Epic Geek Edition.
Maybe that was
it.
And it was fraught with problems. I mean, some people loved it, but it wasn't right. Now it is superheroes versus supervillains. It's a team game, and you each have a team, and we've just simplified the powers. So it's
Okay.
almost a party game. There's very little accounting because so what happens with like a strategy party game is strategy pulls you away from people and the party is like the interactions. So it took years and years to come up with like rules that were thematic enough and simple enough that you could just explain it and people are like, oh, okay, I get how that works. And you go on to the next one and still thematic so that there's like storytelling and fun and then good synergistic strategy. So that one is, I would say the last 30 times I've played it, people have had great times with. And I would say it's like a party game for hobby gamers. And then the last thing I'm working on is a super streamlined deck constructor, a deck builder, which is actually doing really, really well. People are really liking it. It's on tabletop now, simulator now.
Ooh.
And I'm hoping it's similar. It would be in a similar space to like Splendor or Spice Roads, where it really captures something quickly. It's really easy to learn. I mean, if you know deck builders, I can teach it to you in less than 5 minutes. And it just captures something really well.
Well, I'm excited about all those. I enjoy deck builders. I do remember seeing the superhero and villains because I remember really liking someone. I can't remember. I think it was a dragon she was paired with, or
Dragon Rider.
Yeah, dragon. Yeah. So I was like, that's the person I'm going to use first.
Yeah, we're always into more of that, and Splendor is that's a good space to be in. So it sounds like that's something to keep an eye out for. Is that, you said it's on Tabletop Simulator? Like, can people play it right now? Can they try out a demo of it, or is that just for you guys?
I think right now it's just us, but
Okay.
Ben is playing. He put it on. So our graphic designer, he put it on Tabletop Simulator, and he's been playing with friends, and he's actually now played it with friends a lot more than I've played it with friends. I played it with my family.
How's that? How does that go? Do you often test your designs out on your family?
Oceans with my son, and in fact, I'd say a lot of the design was kind of he influenced a lot of the design.
Can we thank him for Invasive Predator? Because you said he liked aggressive.
Yeah, he likes aggressive. I don't know if it wasn't that one. You can thank him for the Kraken.
Oh, then that's a beautiful addition.
Yeah, I mean, most of the really big monsters. I mean, he just watching like the little boy. He is a little boy, so not the little boy in him. Just watching him light up with like these monsters and just seeing his excitement brought back like the little boy in me. And so I played to that. I leaned in on that for the deep, just these fantastical big creatures that like come out and have a huge impact. Just watching, I mean, the way he emotionally interacts with that game is just so much fun for me.
As a kaiju fan, tell him I said thank you.
Oh yeah. Have you seen Kaiju? The Ostrodermo Kaiju?
I'm not sure.
Where is it? Oh, I don't have it right here.
Oh, wait. Do you mean the deep card?
Yeah.
Yeah, no. I think in our last game we had that. I didn't get it though.
It's
For some reason
huge.
I thought you're thinking like a movie or a game. I'm like, wait, does something new come out? I'm like trying to race through my head.
Oh no. We have a card.
Yeah, no, the card. Oh, of course. So unfortunately, someone discarded it. So they knew it'd be I would be too powerful.
That's awesome. Yeah, well, if anyone hasn't played or wasn't a Kickstarter backer of Oceans, we reviewed it and really loved it, and absolutely recommend you keep an eye out for that when it hits store shelves in a wider release. And I guess we reviewed it earlier this year, but it feels to me like it was decades ago because time moves faster now. So yeah, absolutely look for that, and all the other North Star games that I feel like I hardly even have to plug because I think they're out there. But is there anywhere else people can just follow you guys online to keep up with the latest news and stuff like that?
So I'm on Twitter, Crapuchettes. That's my personal account. But all I basically, I do my kids every now and then, but basically games. North Star Games is on Twitter and Facebook, and we have a email list. If you go to our website, you can get on our fan list. We keep the emails down to a minimum, though. We need to actually get a little better about communicating more.
Yeah, annoy people a little bit.
A little bit more at the right time. I mean, because people want to get news. And so a lot of times lots of news happens and I don't think to let people know about it.
Well, we're happy that we could bring a little bit of Gen Con to you and to bring you to a little bit of Gen Con.
Thank you.
For our audience. Thanks for joining us. And we'll have to do something with you again in the future because there's more we could talk about when you have more projects coming out and stuff like that. We're big fans.
Oh, thank you.
So that'll do it for this one, and more coverage on our channel coming soon. But everybody, thanks for watching, and this is Roll for Crit.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks to all our members of our Patreon page for making this show possible. You can sign up for exclusive benefits, or help us by liking and subscribing.
You can also take a quick survey to help us improve Roll for Crit, and in exchange, you'll receive access to a Patreon-exclusive podcast episode. Stay up to date on all our Gen Con online coverage, including live gameplay at rollforcrit.com.